Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name, as always, is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future of work consultancy that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And today with me is Nilesh Thakker, who is in a leadership position in Zinnov. He's the Chief Product Officer, I believe, and he will tell us a little bit about what Zinnov does. So please go ahead, Nilesh.
Thanks, Gleb, for having me on. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. So Zinnov is a management consulting company. We help companies think about global strategy, market research. We also help companies think about global talent and how do you leverage global talent effectively. We do a lot of research on what are the various hotspots, talent hotspots across the world, and how does company can hire talent across the globe to help them grow and increase their growth and profits.
So well, thank you, Nilesh. And tell us a little bit about the appropriate strategy to offboard remote workers and how companies have been getting it wrong recently.
Sure. So, the offboarding, people are very excited when employees join them, but they seem to not take the offboarding as seriously as they do onboarding. And particularly in a remote environment, it's much harder. But we believe that it's a very important aspect of an employee's life cycle with the company. They have contributed to the company, and they want to leave with a sense of accomplishments that they have, they have contributed to the company. And the way to do that is make sure that you have a clear, you have a plan, a planned approach to it. There is a support to it, and there's a transition. So you want to, and what I mean by that is that make sure that it's clearly documented how you want to do this process, particularly when you're doing layoffs, where there are a lot of people being impacted at the same time. If there's no plan, it can go pretty haywire. So make sure the employees are feeling respected and supported during this process. And then there's obviously an important aspect for the company's benefit is the transition. You want to make sure that there's a clear plan to transition all the work and the knowledge that the customer has into this.
So what is the difference between specifically remote workers and in-person workers? What are the particular challenges associated with layoffs with remote workers?
Yeah, so typically a remote worker, you don't see them. It's it's easy to forget all the processes you may want to do. But one of the important part of an important part of offboarding is an exit interview. When a person is leaving, they are much more likely to give you the true feedback, and so you want to make sure that you get that. It's harder to do that when the person is remote. There's also not as many relationships when you have a remote worker. So it's even more important that you're taking care of that. When a local person leaves, you can take them out for lunch, or you give them a farewell party. Whereas remote, it is harder to do, and so it's easy to forget. But it's very important that companies have a clear farewell event for this employee. Make sure that all the equipment and the knowledge which you may need to collect from the employees taken care of properly. All of those sometimes tend to be forgotten. So.
And so let's talk a little bit about some best practices. What would be a framework that companies can use to specifically make sure that none of those issues that you've raised are actually forgotten?
Yeah, as I said, I would say there are three main parts to this. Planning, make sure that it's clearly documented. There's a checklist of things which you may want to take care of. You are being supportive of the employee, respectful and supportive of the employee. And so how can you support them is, suppose if it's a layoff, do you support them through financially, through support about interview, resume research? You also want to make sure that if you have any references, you're willing to give them those references. So those are the support and the respect part of it. And then the transition, making sure that whatever equipment and necessary access controls you need to take care of, all the transition knowledge which you need to make sure that is happening properly. And you can use there are various tools available which you can use to make sure that those are happening well. So.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the tools that you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, there are a lot of software tools available, but also checklists and access control tools available. So we're making it easy for, when an employee leaves and automated, a lot of automated with AI, you could also say what kind of transition work you may want each employee, what knowledge they may have, and how you want to make sure that what kind of transition work you take care of. So checklists, templates, planning. There are, as I said, there are offboarding tools, specifically tools available, which you can use to make sure that it's happening well. So,
Well, in the current economic situation, there are a number of tech companies that are laying off a number of people at once. How should this kind of situation be handled versus one-off offboarding where you figure out someone's not a good fit and you say, well, this person may not be a good fit and we'll want to part ways with this person versus 100 people at once, 1,000 people at once. What is the difference there?
yeah, I mean, I think just as you know, there are more than 300,000 tech employees have been impacted over the last year alone. So, and when you're doing one-off, it's easy to do everything I mentioned earlier. But when
Yeah.
you are when you're doing layoffs in big numbers, you tend to not be able to take all the steps properly. But one of the things is very important is make sure there is a clear communication plan, that all the employees are properly informed. There is an exit interview, which is pretty important, which will help you improve the future processes which you learn from this exit interviews. But also, uh, when you have hundreds of people impacted by this, it also is impacting the current employees who are going to be left behind. And so if they see that it was not done well, you've seen some examples recently when things were not handled properly, it impacts their morale of the company. So these are people who are going to stay behind. You want to make sure that they feel that the people who are impacted, these are colleagues they have been working for years, were properly respected, properly taken care of, because that's going to help them be even more loyal to the company. So it's important that it's not only you think about the people who are impacted, but also people who are going to be left behind. Are they communicated properly? Do they understand why this is being done? So all of those are important parts of this offboarding process.
Now, I want to ask about cultural differences. So we're chatting before the show that right now you're in India and right now I'm in the US. What are the differences between offboarding practices in different cultural contexts? And what do leaders of global companies have to be aware of as they're engaging in thinking about layoffs?
Yeah. Every country has its own, obviously, rules and regulations about this process. So obviously you want to be aware of those things. But also, culturally, like in India, layoffs not as common as, sometimes people are not used to this, and it's very rare. So it's even more important that people understand what is being happening. The communication is done well. Particularly as I said, in India, layoffs are not very common. So what can you do to people understand that this is nothing, hey, this is a business decision, nothing personally against the employees or anything of that sort. In the US, we hear this news common, so people may be used to it. So make sure that people are clearly understanding the process. There's a communication plan. And it's also clear that it's being fair. It's not discriminated against any particular country or area. And this is being done based on the business decisions which requirements which needed to be done. So.
Now, remote workers are, when you look at surveys, overall more worried about layoffs than workers who are working in a hybrid modality or fully in-person modality. To what extent is this concern reflective of reality?
Say that again, maybe.
To what extent are remote workers more frequently laid off than, let's say, hybrid workers or comparable fully in-person workers?
Yeah, I don't think there's any stats which says remote workers. One thing that I do know that 85% of the remote workers feel that the offboarding process is not satisfactory. So So there is a lot of people who are remote. They don't feel that the process was as good as it could have been. So that's something clearly the companies have not been. We are still, all of us are still learning through this, right? Obviously, hybrid and all that is the new concept, at least at the level, at the scale at which it is happening right now. So companies are still learning. Also, tech workers, and until now, tech has not seen as many layoffs as before.
Sure.
So there's also a new phenomenon for the tech industry. And so that is also something with a learning process for the companies. And so I believe that that's going to take a little bit of time. But there are companies which have handled it well and companies which have not handled it well. And hopefully, as we all learn, it'll get better. So make sure that you plan offboarding remotely as well as you do for an in-person employee. So.
Okay, well, I think this is a good note to wrap up on. Are there any last words that you wish to share? Any advice about offboarding that you haven't shared yet?
Yeah. So I would say make sure that offboarding is clearly planned. There's documented a planning both from an actual process and also a communication plan. There's a plan for transition, and there's a clearly plan to support the employee and make sure the employee feels respected. And that is also important for your people who are going to be remaining with the company, that they feel that their colleagues were supported, because that's going to be an important part for your retention strategy. So offboarding should be taken and also one of the most interesting aspect of this is, as employees, when they're leaving, as I said earlier, are likely to give you a lot more candid feedback, which can be very important for the company to make sure that either how to make sure that the process is improved, but also what other things can be improved in the company to make it even a better place to work. So,
excellent. Well, thank you very much, Nilesh. That was very helpful.
thanks, Gleb. Really appreciate your time and looking forward to our discussion in the future again. So.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you check this out and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show and it helps us improve the show. All right, everyone. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. In the meantime, the wisest and most profitable decisions to you, my friends.
Thank you, Gleb. Take care.
You too.